Amanji, what were the core influences? Did he use any, like, I mean, now we know from what you tell us that, you know, he had a very poor opinion of Indian architecture, but ultimately there is a whiff of Indianness to the architecture that we see in the Rashtrapati Bhavan or some of the buildings. So eventually, did he use any of the Indian influences? What were they?
No, he was compelled to use it, because when he comes here and he rejects all architecture, he says the Taj Mahal is imperfect, etc. Then he says that only the Roman architecture is acceptable to him, right? And therefore he was going to make a copy of the Church of Rome. I have drawings of that. He made a copy and he said, here is the dome, you know, there's a central dome, the other dome, and this will be in white marble. And the Viceroy will live in it. I will remodel the interiors to make a bedroom here or something. Yeah, it won't be a church inside. So, which is quite shocking, you know. So Harding says to him, this is unacceptable to me. You are building for the Indian people and we were paying the money for it. So he said, you must build something which will make the Indians civilizationally proud of what we are building. And then he forces him to go to Sanchi to see this and to see the Sanchi Stupa, which is the dome. And he then goes to Rajasthan, and he, you know, the chhatris there around the dome. It's actually a very complex design. Then he goes to Mandu and he comes back and says, it's one of those useless places, these useless buildings built for useless people who had nothing to do, because he looks at the Charokas. And the whole facade of Rashtrapati Bhavan is actually the Jahaz Mahal at Mandu, which is arches. And here he uses pillars. But I have no enmity with Lutyens. You know, if I praise Harding, I can praise him too. They were two Englishmen and we were colonized by them. But I don't like the injustice in the recording of history or our perception of history. So I want to say that the genius of Lutyens was then, because he was forced to, against his will, do this, that he did it fairly well. I mean, there are things he did fairly well. For example, you know, on the top of Rashtrapati Bhavan, you know, in our buildings, we have chhatris. We have 4 pillars or 6 pillars or 8 pillars and a canopy. So he found his canopies useless, as he says in his comments when he comes back from Mandu. So he turns it upside down. He removes the pillars, he just puts the dome, and they become bowls on the terrace, which become fountains.
Wow.
So they were meant to be, they were never really used because they never worked, the plumbing, etc. didn't work. And then when India became independent, it looked too much of a folly, you know, for a democratic president to live in that kind of palace.
Fountains.
Yes, all over the place. And then there were famine, there was drought, you know. So you can't have
that opulence. Yeah.
Yes. So Raja Gopalachari, who was Gandhiji's Samadhi, was the first Indian Governor General. And he was a very simple man. He looked like Gandhi, but a diminutive Gandhi. He wore dhoti kurta. And he arrives in Rashtrapati Bhavan and they say, this is your bedroom. And they take him to the bedroom of Lord Mountbatten, which is huge with big beds. So he said, we just got rid of the British. I don't want to sleep in their bed, you know. So he says, isn't there some other place I can go? So he walks around the whole place. He's Governor General. Everybody's following him. And he goes to the other wing where the maids used to stay. Because we must remember that the Governors General were not old people. They were young people who came, like IAS officers on probation or in mid something. So they had young children and nannies. So there was a wing for the nannies and the children. And Raja Gopalachari said, this suits me. So he slept there. And from that day till today, all the presidents sleep in the nanny's room.
Wow. This is fascinating, Amanji. I mean, I don't know about others, but I didn't know this. And it's just so truly fascinating.
My book came out, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's been out for a while. True.
It's been out, but what is a handicap is that it's gifted. Some presidents prefer not to put it in the market because it's a state gift given to every head of state.
Right.
But I've written about this in magazines and people don't even read that. So let me quickly run through some other things which you asked me about Lutyens. One is the choosing of the site. Okay, so people think that he chose the site. He fought tooth and nail with the Governor General to choose Malcha Palace. Malcha Palace is something we also don't know very well in Delhi. There is Sardar Patel Marg, which we now know, which leads to the airport from the Rashtrapati Bhavan, let's say. And somewhere in the jungle of that on the ridge is a Malcha Palace, which is a flat area with some rocks. So Lutyens, and he would get one or two people with him so that he would lobby for it. You know, there was Swinton Jacob, who was a British architect of whose purpose in this commission was to look after the Indianization of the design and to look at the materials. Okay, so he took him and he said, this is the place. But then Lutyens goes around to see the place with other people who had a different vision. There was this man called Ward, there was Gordon, and there was Goumet. There were three people. They went around and surveyed the place, and they said it's much better to be on Raisina Hill because we want to look down on a vista. So he insisted, and then it was chosen. And the idea was that from this vista, you would look at the Jamuna River, which is where the old fort is, and the Jamuna River beyond. And there was a plan to dam it and bring the water forward. So when you stood here, you would see the water. But then the world wars broke out, and the budgets were cut. And Lord Irwin became the viceroy at the time when this was happening. And Lord Irwin was busy putting his name to the city. You know, he said, how do I fit myself in this city? So Rashtrapati Bhavan was ready, the foundation stone had long been laid. So he then went up on the dome and put a stone there saying, the last stone of Rashtrapati Bhavan. So it says Irwin laid the last stone. And then that stadium, which called the National Stadium, was called Irwin Stadium. And he planted it in a very important place because Lutyens were not in the picture then. And so that it blocked the view to the old fort. So there's a lot of history and a lot of...
Right. This is very, very fascinating, Amanji.
Yes, and one more thing if you want to say. So then when Lutyens started to say that I'm going to build a Roman building and I don't want anything Indian in it, Swinton Jacob was actually very upset and he resigned from his job. Beautiful. He said that I cannot tomorrow be laughed at because my job was to Indianize this building, and here this man is going to build Rome over here. So when he resigns, then Harding realizes that this man is a stubborn man. So he takes on the charge of Indianizing the building and making sure that all the elements that you see are there. And so you'd asked that question already, actually. So the dome is the Sanchi Stupa, which is Buddhist. But in the drawings, I hope we can show them in your program. That, in the first drawing, there's this building and there's just a little dome. So it doesn't show much because the stupa is not like that. It's just a flat kind of thing. And when Baker's buildings come up, the North Block and the South Block, and their domes are proportionate to the European standards, and you go back at a distance and look at the whole countryside, then the Rashtrapati Bhavan got dwarfed because it's further away. So Lutyens got a balloon, because there were no drones those days. So he got a balloon. He went up to see the perspective, which you can't see otherwise, and realized that Baker's domes are so big and his was tiny. Yes, and his whole thing was a fight with Baker. He wanted to dominate him, which historically he succeeded.
Which is what he has done.
Which he has done, because of our ignorance also. Yeah. So then he raised the drum of the Rashtrapati Bhavan by 6 meters, which is a lot. So when you now look at it, after I've told you this, you have a narrow building, and the dome is 2.5 times the proportion of its base, of that building, which is completely wrong. And when he's talking about the Taj Mahal being, not architecture, I did an analysis in my book. The Taj Mahal is a perfect equilateral triangle seen from its platform to its dome, and then from its pishtak on top, which is that gateway to the dome. They're 2 equilateral triangles. And if you draw the same triangles on the work of Edwin Lutyens, they go like that and like that. They're sort of,
tapering edges, yes.
They're not correct.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.